You're not about to hear any motivational pep talk. What will be revealed here is a technique that completely transforms how your mind deals with the world. A true mental code, so effective that many psychology professionals avoid touching it in public. Why? Because it dismantles the emotional structure that keeps you controllable, vulnerable, and dependent. You were taught to be kind, calm, and gentle, but you were never taught to be whole. And that's where everything begins to change. There is a part of you that has been rejected, denied, repressed. It carries your anger, your ambition, your ego, your thirst for power. You learned to hide it all in order to be accepted, but the price was high. You lost your presence, your strength, your authenticity. That forgotten part is what psychology calls the shadow, and today you will integrate that shadow without fear, without guilt, and use it as a source of clarity, focus, and spiritual magnetism. Command, not repression. Presence, not performance. And before we go any further, declare your intention in the comments with the phrase, "I command my silence, and my silence commands the world." The written word carries vibration, and what you declare begins to become real. When we talk about shadow integration, we're referring to one of the most powerful and least understood practices in human development. And we are not alone in this view. Mexican neuroscientist and consciousness researcher Jacobo Grinberg, one of the leading authorities on the study of consciousness, spent his life proving that reality is not something external and fixed, but a direct projection of our mental structure. According to him, what we fail to acknowledge within ourselves manifests in the world as conflict, limitation, and chaos. Grinberg proposed that there is a neuronal field, a kind of vibrational matrix that connects mind, spirit, and matter. When we deny inner aspects, like anger, jealousy, ego, or manipulation, we're not becoming better, we're only weakening our presence, while those very aspects continue to act unconsciously, silently distorting our reality. Carl Jung's depth psychology confirms it. What you do not make conscious will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And ancient spirituality already taught, light without shadow is empty, and shadow without light is destructive. True strength is born from integration. In this video, we go beyond theory. You will learn, step by step, the art of mastering what masters you and transforming your mind into a field of silent, irresistible power. From your earliest years, your mind learned something crucial. Showing certain parts of who you are could cost you affection, security, and belonging. Thus, a silent programming began. Whenever you expressed anger, you were labeled a troublemaker. When you showed too much confidence, you were called arrogant. If you cried, you were weak. If you said no, you were selfish. The result, you learned to edit yourself. You cut away parts of yourself to be accepted, or at least not rejected. This editing happens unconsciously, not out of malice, but for protection. The mind creates silent rules based on key experiences, many of them traumatic. I can't show this. I mustn't say that. If I'm like this, I won't be loved. These phrases aren't on your surface. They're engraved in a hidden code that governs your perception, your decisions, and your relationships. Jacobo Grinberg said that reality is not external, but a structured reflection of your inner perception. If your mind is trained to hide undesirable aspects, the reality you see will be limited. You will see yourself as fragile, confused, always seeking validation. And that happens because essential parts of your energy have been exiled, but not destroyed. Those parts remain alive, hidden in what psychology calls the shadow. And what is in the shadow doesn't die. It simply acts from behind the curtain. You may suppress your anger, but it returns as resentment. You may deny your ambition, but it shows up as envy. You may repress your power, but it turns into submission. What you refuse to accept in yourself infiltrates everything you do, even your noblest emotions. This process is like living according to a script you didn't write, but follow religiously. A socially acceptable script, but spiritually sterile. The pursuit of perfection, constant peace, absolute self-control is actually a trap, because the more you try to be light, the more you feed the hidden darkness. Worse, over time, this internal editing begins to feel normal to you. You become accustomed to emptiness, disconnection, self-abandonment. You start calling it maturity, but in truth, you're trapped in a weakened version of the person you were born to be whole. Freedom begins with a shock of awareness. Understanding that your current behavior may simply be a reflection of an unconscious emotional survival mechanism. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. The good news is, if this mechanism was learned, it can be reprogrammed. And that's exactly what begins to happen when you decide to look inward with truth, without masks, without excuses, without needing to please. What's next? Recognizing the shadow, not as an enemy, but as part of your potential. Are you ready? You were taught to be light, to smile when you're angry, to say, "I'm fine," when you're broken inside, to be kind, even when you want to scream. This cultural conditioning shaped an identity that seems functional, but is incomplete, because you are not only light, you are also shadow, and the more you try to deny it, the more it masters you from behind. The shadow is made up of all the traits, emotions, and impulses you learned to deem unacceptable. Anger, jealousy, desire for control, vanity, ambition, pride. Everything that at some point was judged wrong or ugly was shoved into the basement of consciousness. But what is excluded does not vanish. It grows in the dark. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Jacobo Grinberg, in turn, asserted that reality is a malleable structure shaped by our perception. Therefore, if your perception is fragmented, your reality will be chaotic. Denying the shadow is an act of survival at first, but it becomes a prison over time. Repressed anger turns into uncontrolled outbursts or illness. A denied ego transforms into emotional dependency. Unacknowledged need for control manifests as subtle manipulation. You find yourself surrounded by recurring patterns, conflicts, and self-sabotage, unaware that it's your shadow trying to emerge, crying out to be seen. But here's the essential point. The shadow isn't evil. It's honest. It holds your raw truth, your unpolished strength, your will to live uncensored. When you integrate it, something powerful happens. You don't become worse, you become whole, and only a whole person can truly be free. Ancient spirituality understood this. In the shamanic traditions studied by Grinberg, healing rituals involved not just light, but direct confrontation with the soul's darkest aspects. The true spiritual warrior is not the one who avoids the dark, but the one who walks through it with awareness. When you acknowledge that you have anger but use it to set firm boundaries, you are integrating. When you recognize your thirst for power but choose to channel it ethically, you are evolving. When you accept your vanity but don't place it above truth, you are maturing. The integration process is neither comfortable nor abstract. It's sacred and liberating. Because nothing, absolutely nothing, can control you once you look inside and say, "I know who I am. Even in the darkness, I remain whole." From here on, there's no room for masks. The next step is practical, learning to identify, name, and consciously redirect your shadow. Are you ready to use what once weakened you as a weapon of power? Integrating the shadow is not a conceptual exercise. It's practical, visceral, and direct. It demands precise inner action. There are 3 fundamental stages on this path: projection, naming, and inner alchemy. Each is a portal for reclaiming pieces of your power left behind. Projection, the mirror that reveals what you hide. Everything that deeply irritates you in others, that triggers you emotionally without warning, is a mirror. The anger you feel toward the arrogant may reflect your own repressed greatness. Your contempt for the manipulator may reveal fear of using your own persuasive power. This isn't about justifying the other, but recognizing that what wounds you often connects to something you deny in yourself. Projection is the psyche's most powerful unconscious mechanism. When used with awareness, it becomes a surgical tool of self-knowledge. Whenever something or someone destabilizes you, instead of reacting, ask, "What does this reveal about me?" Naming, giving form to the invisible. After you identify what's been projected, it's time to name it. No euphemisms, no softening. You're not here to be politically correct with yourself. You're here to be real. Don't call fear shyness. And don't call cowardice patience. Don't call need for approval kindness. To name is to give form, and what has form can be transformed. Naming your shadow with honesty is the first act of mental sovereignty. Say, "I acknowledge the tyrant in me. I see the seducer, the coward, the controller." This isn't a sentence. It's a baptism, the beginning of alchemy, inner alchemy, turning poison into medicine. The final stage is the most subtle and the most powerful. Now that you've recognized and named the hidden trait, ask yourself, how can this aspect be useful if wielded consciously? Repressed anger can become boundary-setting strength. Denied ego can become healthy self-worth. Unconscious manipulation can transform into strategic ethical persuasion. Vanity can become diligence in maintaining your energy and presence. The secret here is to turn what once dominated you into a tool of direction. Jacobo Grinberg spoke of the mind as a moldable field. That's what this alchemy does. It reshapes your internal field so it holds everything, light and shadow, in a state of dynamic balance. This process isn't about becoming someone new, but finally becoming yourself, complete. Because true transformation doesn't happen when you rid yourself of darkness, but when you decide to command it. Chaos now is at your service. But integrating the shadow is also a minefield. The same process that can liberate you, if done immaturely or egoically, can imprison you even further. Awakening the shadow without preparation is like releasing a wild beast without learning to command it. The result? You don't become stronger. You become more reactive, more reckless, more unbalanced. Instead of mastering your darkness, you become its slave. That's the real danger of an unintegrated shadow. People dive into self-knowledge, but stop at the surface. They read books, take notes, discover their toxic traits, and then use that as an excuse. That's just how I am. At least now I'm honest. They confuse sincerity with evolution and continue living with the same wounds, now wrapped in spiritual or psychological jargon. A spiritualized ego is even more dangerous than a raw ego. It wears masks of light to hide an uncontrolled shadow. It speaks of vibration, healing, gratitude, but acts with manipulation, judgment, and moral superiority. And worse, it truly believes it's awakened when in fact it's only refining its unconscious defenses. Jacobo Grinberg warned us about this. In his studies of shamanism and consciousness, he noticed that true knowledge doesn't free on its own. It demands vibrational integration. That is, it requires that what you discover about yourself be incorporated into how you live, feel, and act. Without this, the shadow isn't healed. It's merely refined. It stops exploding but begins to leak. In sarcasm disguised as humor, in kindness laced with resentment, in control hidden as care. It's the nice ones who manipulate in silence, the healers who project their wounds onto others, the awakened who preach freedom while living trapped in spiritual vanity. True spirituality isn't a stage, it's a silent, disciplined, brutally honest practice. Integrating the shadow means facing your own reflection without adornments, filters, or excuses. And even more, it demands self-responsibility. Because once you awaken a dark trait, you can no longer pretend you don't see it. If you don't integrate it, it will master you. If you don't transform it, it will contaminate you. That's why this video isn't an invitation to the ego, but to humility, a call to abandon the idea of perfection and embrace the complexity of being. True self-knowledge is radical because it forces you to stop blaming the world and start asking yourself, what in me is creating this? An unintegrated shadow destroys relationships, poisons ambitions, and falsifies your identity. An integrated shadow strengthens bonds, refines purpose, and amplifies your presence. The next step, then, is to learn to walk with it, not behind or ahead, but side by side with the soul in command. Many believe that integrating the shadow means becoming insensitive, as if mastering emotions required stifling the heart. But this is yet another mistake, and one of the most dangerous, because true strength doesn't exist without soul, and there is no strategic wisdom without conscious compassion. True integration doesn't turn you into an unfeeling rock. It makes you a complete being, one who knows their darkness but acts with direction, one who feels but isn't overwhelmed, one who observes but isn't paralyzed, one who cares but isn't consumed. That is the balance that separates true awakeners from the hardened. Grinberg understood this deeply. In studying indigenous healers and expanded states of mind, he saw that shamans weren't cold. They were deeply connected to the heart, but with a mind trained not to be dragged by chaos. They had emotional mastery, yes, but never at the expense of empathy. They had strategic clarity, but with a higher purpose. This is what you need to develop: dual awareness. On one side, instinct, the part of you that senses danger, acts with firmness, knows how to assert itself. On the other, consciousness, the part that observes, chooses the right moment, thinks beyond the immediate. When these two poles align, true silent power is born. You don't need to explode to be strong, nor dim yourself to be accepted. There is an authority that doesn't shout. It simply enters a room and changes the frequency. This presence arises from someone who has integrated everything that was denied, without losing their humanity. It's presence with soul, and more. This silent power doesn't feed on revenge, pride, or external validation. It feeds on purpose, knowing that your strength serves something greater than your ego, that your strategy exists to protect your peace, expand your mission, elevate your vibration, not to dominate others or hide from pain. The path is narrow, but it's possible. You can learn to look someone in the eye without needing to win an argument. You can hear an attack and choose silence, not out of weakness, but because you already know who you are. You can live amid chaos and remain centered, not out of insensitivity, but out of vibrational maturity. Mastery without losing your soul is this: not erasing your humanity, but refining it until it becomes indestructible, until your light is no longer fragile and your shadow no longer a threat, but allies serving your consciousness, serving your path. When that happens, you become rare, whole, conscious, and dangerous to any system that relies on your emotional frailty to control you. Now that you've grasped the depth of what's been revealed here, don't let this knowledge become just another forgotten fact. What you've learned is not a theory, it's a practice, and it demands decision. Because true transformation happens the moment you choose to act differently, think differently, feel with greater awareness. In the coming days, pay attention to your triggers. Notice emotions that arise without warning. Instead of repressing or judging, pause, breathe, and ask, what does this reveal about me? With each honest answer, you reclaim a piece of your power. With each conscious choice, you train your mind to obey your soul, not your fear. Apply the 3 steps: projection, naming, and alchemy. Rewrite your mental field. Command your presence. Don't wait to feel ready. Readiness comes from practice, not theory. If this content resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications. Share with someone who needs to access this silent power within. And leave in the comments, I am whole, and my shadow serves me. This is your call, and the decision, as always, is in your hands.